Welcome to the Facilities Committee meeting. I'm your vice chair, acting as chair because Lydia hasn't arrived yet. So,
May 2nd.
Oh, it's May 2nd, 2017. So, if you're going to start with any administrative remark, introductions about anything?
No.
All right.
None.
Seeing none, we'll move on to public comment. You're all familiar with the new rules. They're back there on the placard. Do we have any?
Any new rules or public comment?
Both.
Good afternoon, Judy Sherry, Governor Circle, Newtown Square. The minutes reflect a concern about the large sign posted on Lancaster Avenue advertising a mattress sale to benefit Radnor High School. I'd like to extend the concern to the widespread use of signs advertising this sale that littered the entire township. Apparently, this company has found a great loophole in our advertising policy and sells its merchandise by using students as shills for its products. And the district facilitates it by providing space in the high school. I question whether students should be selling mattresses and why the school district should be promoting this private company's products. And at the last meeting, I asked about the private ACT company using the district facilities and being promoted in district publications. And at that time, I asked how much revenue goes to the PTSA, and does the company pay a fair market rent to use the school district's facilities? What's happening next year regarding parking? Will board members review the $75 cost or fee to students to see if it makes sense? The fee seems arbitrary, and I think we've also had it in place for a fairly long time. What's the specific goal for the fee? And will parking spaces that are no longer being given to nonprofits be available to students? The drug dogs was in the minutes, and I just wondered if the student council had a chance to kind of weigh in on the process to see if they have any suggestions. And two other things. The fact that capital plans are being discussed in this committee and not just appearing at the end of the year is definitely a step forward. It would be helpful, however, if any changes in the plans were highlighted with a brief explanation, because it's hard as you get different plans to know how they compare with previous plans. And my final comment is there's a Triparty agreement that's mentioned on the agenda, and I think it's related to the bridge. I would hope, as I've suggested a couple of times before, that the district will really review this agreement to see if there are other areas that perhaps we could renegotiate and make it a better agreement for Radnor Elementary. Thank you.
Okay, all right, because okay. All right.
It's about parking.
Okay, gotcha. Debbie Singer, Spring Mill Road, Villanova. My comment is a compliment, which I know you don't get that often. I work for a nonprofit music education organization, and we have an annual event, and we use the middle school on Sunday. It's a performathon where music teachers and their students raise money. They give it to us, and then their students get to give a performance for family and friends for free. And we've been doing it for 7 years, and we really rely on it. And what I want to say is that the staff that worked with me on this were just amazing. So Esther Purnell, Kathy Carroll, Joe Perchetti, and Matt Ryan. They made it so warm and welcoming for me. And I've done cultural arts with Matt for years at the middle school. So I was thrilled when he said he'd give his Sunday up and work with us. I knew we were in good hands. So for a change, I'd like to say that it was a great experience and a great success for us. So thank you.
Could you repeat the names again? Could you repeat the names of Matt Ryan?
Yes, okay. Esther, Kathy Carroll, the secretary. You have them all? Okay. Okay.
Good afternoon, Cindy Spurtle, 106 Valley Forge Terrace, Wayne. I'm looking forward to the discussion on the pedestrian bridge as to exactly whose responsibility painting it will be. I'm happy to see the capital improvements discussion happening, but concerned because of the total amount needed to complete the 2017-18 requested projects, and next month the final budget will be approved, and this hasn't even been included in the budget. A couple items, and this may be addressed under agenda item number 2, where you're talking about some current facilities issues that have come up, and this may answer those questions. I noticed that we have spent the money for the HVAC for the administration building, but the $50,000 once again shows up in 2017-18. Does that mean that's an additional fix that needs to be made, or will we continue to carry it in 2017-18, since the year-to-date expense is very close to that at $45,000? Ithan Elementary School, year-to-date expenditure of, which did not show up in the budget, of $182,913. which is $140,913 more than what was budgeted. My question is that what the amount, is that the cost to repair the field that we did not know about when the budget was made last year? And if so, wow. And the other was a remodeling of the exterior for an additional $84,000. If I remember correctly, and Todd, you may correct me on this later, there was a playground equipment donated by the Ithan PTO. Is this something different? It says equipment replace lower playground. Is this equipment the district has paid for? And if so, where's the new playground equipment that was donated? Another question on Wayne Elementary. There's a $180,000 that's been spent year to date, which was not in the January copy of the capital plan, and I noticed that there's $200,000 cash on hand. Was the $200,000 used to provide the funds for the $180,000? And coming back to and this is the Radnor High School. The budget for 16-17 for the HVAC at the high school was $120,000. It looks like we've spent $170,000, which is about 42% higher. Are we that far off on our budget figures, or was there something else that was included in that? That seems to be a big discrepancy. And I'm surprised to see, after learning what I learned at the last couple meetings about the exterior bleachers, that they are safe. We don't need to repair them immediately. And I thought there were a couple years, but I noticed that the $1 million is still included in the amount to be budgeted in the capital plan for 17-18. If we don't need to use it, that would sure help on the amount of money that's going to be picked up from somewhere in our funds to pay for the capital equipment needed. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Seeing none? Did we already do the?
No, we're at the minutes.
Okay. So did we do introductions? Okay. Okay. So we're at the approval of the minutes from the April 4th meeting. Committee? Any comments, corrections? Nope. Okay. Minutes stand as written. All right, let's dive right in. So item number 1, the pedestrian bridge, the Triparty agreement.
This was actually brought up at a previous meeting. Mr. Madden brought up the Triparty agreement and some repairs to the pedestrian footbridge that were needed. He asked us to go back and look at that Triparty agreement to determine who was responsible for those repairs. So Mike Christofko actually reviewed the agreement and provided a written opinion to the district that the district is responsible for 50% of the repairs, as well as the township being responsible for 50% of the repairs. We're not aware of any cost estimate, God bless you, any cost estimate regarding what those repairs will be. And the next step will be for us probably to reach out to the township to inquire about those repairs, or to wait for the township to reach out to us.
I would suggest we reach out to them because the current manager of the township lets to let things go till it needs to be knocked down as a way to cut costs. So I would suggest we reach out to him, or Narsini, or I forget who the director of public works is over there. Yeah.
I would also like to suggest that we also revisit, just like Ms. Sherry had said, revisit the agreement, because there could be a point where we just get it fixed and we charge them. So I want to find out in that agreement who can initiate fixing something. It shouldn't have to be both parties agree that this thing needs to be fixed. If that's written in there, then that's fine. I drive by there. At this point, I think it's just cosmetic. It needs to be repainted. It needs to be a little bit of that type of maintenance put on it. And in saying that, I don't want to wait for a year to get an answer back from the township that, yes, indeed, it needs to be done, because we know it needs to be done. I know it needs to be done. I think we can discuss that once we find out how do you trigger getting something like that finished.
Could I just ask, where is this coming from? Do we know that something's wrong with the bridge?
If you drive underneath it, you do.
You're just saying that, you think it doesn't look in,
cosmetically.
okay.
I'm not an engineer, so I haven't done any kind of study on it, but if you drive past it, it looks as if it's in disrepair. I think that it's just a cosmetic piece. So we're going to look at it.
Okay,
and
so
find that out.
you're bringing this forward from observation.
Oh, yeah, we brought it forward.
Got it.
And the reason why we brought it forward, because on the Parks and Recreation Board, which I also sit on, there was no money being spent in that park for the bridge. So I said, well, we'll have to look into it, because then that gives them an opportunity to budget their piece, and we budget our piece.
So did it come up in that committee meeting that people were concerned about the look of the bridge?
It did.
That's where you heard about it?
And then they
Okay,
said
got
that
it.
we don't know who's going to pay for it, and that's how it started, for us to find out who pays for it, how do you start it, things like that.
But it's a steel bridge, so you want to keep it painted so it doesn't rust.
Right, yes, exactly.
So according to the Triparty agreement, it states in the agreement that the township shall maintain and repair the pedestrian bridge in accordance with applicable laws, provided that the district shall be responsible for snow and ice removal. It goes on to further state the cost of construction, maintenance, and repairs shall be shared equally by the district and the township, subject to the limitations set forth in Section 15. The pedestrian bridge shall be owned by the township. So to answer your question, Mr. Madden, I don't believe that the school district can initiate those repairs. I believe that that would have to come through the township, although I'm perfectly fine with reaching out to the township to inquire about the potential repairs to
Michelle,
the bridge.
do you have a copy of the agreement?
I do not have the entire agreement with me, just Mike Christofko's legal opinion.
Right, so it would stand to reason, I think, in most agreements for a party that's required to maintain, if they fail, the party that is the beneficiary of that maintenance may step in and then charge them for the cost of that maintenance. I mean, that's a pretty routine provision in an agreement. I think that's kind of
what
what
I'm
Chuck
talking
is
about.
thinking about. So while the obligation may be initially on the township to perform that maintenance, there should be, I would hope there would be, a clause in there that would allow the district to step in if they're deficient in their obligations. If not, they could just never do the maintenance. So it would seem to, I'd probably want to see the agreement.
I believe so. All right, let's move on to item number 2.
Administrator Chiller, it was put up over break, and our guys have it all hooked up, and we are waiting for the rep to come out on Thursday to be there when we initially put it full functional to make sure everything's okay, that our warranty's good. So that will happen on Thursday, and thank you to the staff in this building for last week hanging in there on those hot days. We appreciate it. Any questions on the chiller?
So we'll move on to the Ithan Playground. As you're all familiar, we've been doing some site repairs to the Ithan Playground so that we could install the playground equipment. The playground equipment has all been installed, and if you had an opportunity to go out and see it, it really turned out quite nicely. We did have some issues late last week with some ponding. We took pictures and sent it to the contractor. The contractor was there on Friday, did some additional site work, and now we're hoping for some rain so we can double check to make sure that everything is been completed satisfactorily.
And we will also, I was in contact with our tree vendor. There are some limbs that are overhanging that equipment, so we're going to have him come in and move the tree line back off the fence, off of 320 there, just a couple feet, so we don't have any limbs hanging over. The playground will still get shade in the afternoon because the sun will be on the west side of that tree line, but there will be no limbs hanging over the playground itself.
And does the line item that was in there about the playground, that's for the planting of the anchoring, planting of the equipment, not the actual equipment, right?
So in the capital
or is it
plan,
like
we can address that
50-50?
when we get to those areas as we go through the capital plan, but I'll be able to answer some of the questions that Mrs. Spurtle asked earlier in opening remarks.
Is the hope that this playground will be used this school year, or?
We talked about being able to fence off the grass area. Children should still be able to get on the playground and utilize the playground equipment this school year between now and the end of the year. And hopefully in the fall when they come back, the grass will have taken and they'll be able to utilize the grass area as well.
All righty, thanks.
All right, Jess.
So we do have a high school elevator that is out of commission. It failed the inspection for pressure check with a piston. We are going to need to replace that, and that bill was $37,500
Just for the part.
for the part to fix that. So we have that ordered, and when it comes in, but it is out of commission until we can get it fixed.
So just so everyone is aware, that was a non-budgeted item. It was an expenditure that we weren't anticipating. Todd and I have met to go over the facilities budget. We believe that we can move some money around to pay for that out of the general fund this year, as opposed to paying for it out of the capital fund.
Just to be clear for people watching, nobody was on it, nobody got stranded, it was just, it didn't meet, because these things are hydraulic rams. So they
Correct.
didn't
It was routine yearly check that, actually, it's bi-yearly.
Bi-yearly.
Or biannual.
Yeah.
So it was just a routine check. They came in. It's not that
not
somebody
making
that
the
was
pressure
on
to
there,
lift it
yeah,
up,
it
yeah.
just didn't meet the standards. We were a little
So I
under,
can-
so we're going to replace it because it did meet the standards. But no one was in jeopardy.
Yeah,
while
no, that's
they
actually a
used it.
good thing, 'cause my office building has the same type of hydraulic, and it actually caught on fire 4 weeks ago, and haven't had an elevator in the building, which is causing problems for people.
Just to be clear, that was not a Radnor
That was not a
School,
Radnor building, no, it was
property?
a Santander Bank building.
We do have other
One
elevators
Lord's
in the
structure.
building, so it's not that we're completely out of an elevator.
Oh, okay, so there's another one.
Buses. So this past couple of weeks, we've actually had 2 of our wheelchair buses have engines blow on them. One of them was our large handicap accessible bus, unfortunately, and the second one was a smaller handicap accessible bus. We're currently working with Mr. Hearn to see if there's another district nearby that could borrow us a wheelchair bus in the event that we needed it. We believe that we'll be fine, but we always like to have a backup plan just in case we incur another engine problem. We also have John looking into whether or not it's more feasible to purchase a used bus. These buses that we've had engine problems with they're international buses. They're part of a class action lawsuit. We have 11 of those buses currently. Unfortunately, though they don't have a lot of miles on them, with repeated engine problems, we're thinking that it doesn't make a lot of sense to do engine repairs to them. We have also talked about, when we go over the capital plan, you'll see it in the capital plan, we do have buses that I've recommended that we postpone until next year to go out for bid because of the propane pilot that we did. We got off of the cycle. We normally would purchase buses in the fall, but because we were looking at propane, we purchased them at the beginning of January, February previously. So my recommendation is going to change slightly from what we discussed. My recommendation is going to be that we go out for bid and prepare the bid now, awarded in June, and then take occupancy of those vehicles in the summertime. So just so everyone is aware of that.
Would that be more buses than we normally would to make up for these two that went down?
No, it would
they
not.
be wheelchair buses?
It will just be the 4 or 5 that we spoke
4.
about, depending on what the price comes in at.
And these are going to be propane that we're going to go for bid, go out for
Hearn's
bid.
preference is that we bid
Yep.
for propane buses.
Yep.
Yes, he's been
Okay.
very happy with the service that they've received from them and their performance, and he'd like to continue to increase the number of propane buses.
Okay.
And we also have our fueling station currently out at the bus depot. That's been completed. If you have an opportunity to go out and take a look at it, it's really quite impressive, and I'd encourage you to do so.
See it every day on my way to work. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
So Michelle, can you enlighten me again on what are we actually doing for the 2 wheelchair buses? We're going to try to borrow one, but are they rebuilding the engines? Are we buying new ones?
Our recommendation at this point in time is to purchase new wheelchair buses. One of them was a spare, so we've lost one of our spares. That's not quite as detrimental as one of them that's in your current fleet. The other is one of our current fleet buses. So like I said, we think we'll be okay through the end of the year in terms of transporting our students. Our primary concern is just making sure that if we do have another problem with the wheelchair bus, that we have a backup plan so we can get those kids to school in time.
So in June, we're going to go out for two of the wheelchair accessible buses.
We'll actually do it in May.
In May, okay.
In May, and then we'll have that bid ready to be awarded at the June meeting. So we'll award it in June. We'll send those purchase orders out July 1.
Are they air conditioned?
They are all air conditioned, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that is a result of Michelle and I speaking to one of our mechanics last week about rebuilding the engines, if it's cost effective or not.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right, looks
Your microphone is not on, Lydia.
It looks like we're ready for the capital plan. Agenda item number 3.
So we're going to be going over the capital plan. We're going to talk about some things that have transpired since we looked at this last time. You'll see that it has April up on the top. In terms of projects moving, none of the projects have moved since we looked at this previously. What has changed has been we've updated some cash on hand in certain areas as we've spent the money down. So on the first page, and let me just bring it up here. On the first page, you can see the various projects outlined by the current year, as well as 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20, and 2021. You can see for a 4-year total, we have just over $6 million in projects. And you can also see by building the projects listed for each and every year. We'll start with the administration building. You can see the administration building. The very first item that's listed in the 2017-18 budget year and highlighted in yellow is actually the HVAC. So what happened with that is we were anticipating that it would get budgeted in 17-18. We've actually moved the project up. We utilized the cash on hand that we had previous. So what will happen as we move forward and we present this to the facilities or the finance committee next week, that project will actually come off of the 17-18 budget column, because we're completing it in the current fiscal year. So that $50,000 will be removed when it's presented, and there'll be no projects for the administration building slated for next year in 17-18.
So is that the chiller?
That's the chiller,
Okay.
correct.
Got it.
So if you remember, that was a project that we had previously talked about doing for the administration building, and we'd kind of been moving it, we kept pushing it from one year to the next, to the next, to the next. And so we had anticipated that we would complete it in 17-18. Unfortunately, the useful life expired in 16-17. So that will come off.
And you guys are comfortable not doing the elevators controls?
We are comfortable not doing the elevator controls.
Is everybody in the building okay with you not doing the
Haven't had anyone stuck in the elevator for quite some time, so that's a positive.
Right. 'Cause, you know, I mean, these things happen in threes. One elevator at the high school, you never know when the next two are coming.
So, as of right now, we are comfortable not replacing those controls. So when we look to the next page, which is the transportation facility, we are recommending that we do a generator. We know that we've got some additional work that we need to do regarding where that generator would be placed and exactly how it would be installed. But we are recommending that a generator be placed on the transportation facility grounds. And as we go down to the bottom, you can see the buses highlighted there in yellow. Again, those were buses that were budgeted. You can see in 16-17, we did not purchase any of those buses, so that cash on hand is available. And my recommendation has been that we purchase those buses in 17-18 and get ourselves back on cycle for replacement in the fall. So if we go out for the wheelchair buses in May and we award in June and process the purchase order July 1, that will accomplish that. At Ithan Elementary School, there's $270,000 that we're recommending be included for roof repair. We're still recommending that that be included in the 17-18 budget. We're also recommending that $10,000 be included for repointing and $8,000 for restroom hardware. I am going to let Todd address that. He and I had a conversation about the hardware, and he's got an update on that he'd like to share.
We did try one of the box stores lock sets. It does work. The issue is the plate that covers your door, where the handle comes out of, is not large enough. So there, two things would happen. One, you'd see a discolored ring, and two, you'd see the holes from the current commercial locks. So what we're doing is we're going out and looking at that, and we believe we can come in cheaper than the estimated price of those locks by doing some other tweaks. Still have commercial handles, still be compliant, but we're trying a different avenue. So once that avenue is, we go down it, we make sure we're comfortable, we would come back to you and say exactly what we're doing.
So 8,000 seems like a lot for locks, like door handles.
It does.
Are they
It
something-
is. Well, the commercial, they were over $350 a piece, and there are 40, I think there's 30 to 40 locks and bathrooms in the building. When you look at basically each grade level or each set of classrooms has a boy and a girl. So you look at that and you add them up. So 10 would be $3,500. So we were figuring, roughly 30, and that's where we came out with the 8. So we think we can come in under that. But that's what the original 8,000 came from.
The next thing you'll see on Ithan is you'll see playgrounds budgeted at 40 and year-to-date spent at $182,913. That is the direct result of the fact that the $40,000 was what the district was budgeting for playground equipment. So we'll look at the Ithan playground. You'll see the $40,000 budgeted, $182,900 has been spent. The $40,000 that you see budgeted there was for replacement of playground equipment. The $182,000 includes the $40,000 that the district spent. It also includes the cost of the repairs to the Ithan playground. What it does not include it does not include the offset of the donation from the PTO. So I will add a notation to this so that it clearly references what that $182,000 makes up. The district did spend the $40,000 and it spent roughly $54,000 on repairs to the playground. But remember, the repairs to the playground was utilized from the cash on hand for the construction at Ithan that was transferred the previous fiscal year. So it's a little deceiving because you don't really see that on this report if you're looking at what was budgeted versus what was spent. So if you look at the remodel, the exterior, you see nothing budgeted, but you see $84,000 that was spent. That's because what was budgeted for that project was budgeted in 15-16, and there was some work that hadn't been completed yet. So it looks like we spent money that we didn't budget, but technically we did budget it. You're just not seeing that in this report. And then furniture, again, you can see for the exterior, there's some cash on hand that we'll be utilizing. And then, of course, Ithan is identified to have its data wiring repaired and reinstalled in 2017-18. The data wiring is something we've been doing district-wide, and we've been trying to do it a little bit at a time. So instead of doing all of the buildings at once, we're staggering the buildings. Currently, the administration building is having its data wiring replaced. At Wayne Elementary, you can see the only project that we are identifying for 2017-18 is some gym door replacements. Those are exterior doors, correct? And the doors are really in pretty poor shape, so we would like to get those replaced. You can see again, this is another project where there's nothing budgeted, but we've spent $180,000 for remodeling the exterior. Again, that is the balance of the project that was originally budgeted in 2015-16, and that's just the balance of what was not completed yet. At Radnor Elementary, we have some issues on the playground where the surface of the playground is in need of repair. So we're recommending that $30,000 be transferred in order to do some rubber resurfacing of the playground area. At the middle school, we are proposing that $12,000 be set aside for wrestling mats. The current wrestling mats that they have are in poor condition, as well as the wrestling mats at the high school. So we will be looking to bid those wrestling mats. We find that if we do a bid and we have multiple mats, we can usually get a better price. So we will be bidding those. We'll bid them together. There's some windows in the watershed area and the fitness room. We have moved the watershed area windows over to 2021, but we're requesting that the windows for the fitness area be included at $4,500 in the 17-18 capital budget. Along with $1,200 for whiteboards slightly below that, you'll see that is to finish that fitness area that's located off the gymnasium. And then in the auditorium, they would like to have their auditorium rebalanced and then have some speaker pendants replaced, totaling around $13,000. At the high school for 2017-18, again, you'll see wrestling mats that we are proposing. That's also a lift at the high school, as well as the wrestling mats. There's $25,000 we're proposing for sealant. I think we discussed this previously. It's not sealant like most of us are used to. It's
It's for the bricking, so they keep their waterproofing status.
And then the carpeting, we're recommending that we utilize $40,000 of cash on hand that was budgeted in 16-17 because we're not going to be doing the carpeting replacement. We're moving that to 18-19 so we can do the whole library all at one time. And then you'll see the $1 million for the bleachers. The $1 million is still included in this budget. We've had some additional conversations. Unfortunately, when you're trying to find someone to help you get a price for bleachers, it takes a while till you find the right person. We finally think that we have the right person who can help us with that. It's a company called Southern Bleachers. They're located in Georgia. Somebody coming out to take a look at our property either this week or next week. They do have representatives in every state in the U.S. We have one very close to us here in Pennsylvania, so he and I have had contact. Our initial conversation regarding the replacement of the stadium, the home side, he did look at it on Google Maps and thinks that the $1 million is really a pretty good estimate just for that one side. Soft cost would be roughly around $200,000, with the structural piece being around $800,000 is based on our original conversation. Now keep in mind, he has not been out to this site. That would also not include any engineering, permit fees or things like that if we would need to do some of those additional things. So what our recommendation is going to be, and we discussed this previous, is we're going to recommend that we fund that project over 2 years. And so we're looking to have around $250,000 to $300,000 included in the 17-18 budget, so we can do some of the work that we need to do, including repairs to the current bleachers, so that they have a few additional years of useful life, and continue to research that project and work on that project and bring it back to you at some point during the 17-18 fiscal year. And then you can see the very last project that we are recommending is signs in the main gym. The high school has pushed this project for multiple fiscal years. They are anxious to get the signage back up in that gym and are ready to commit to that project currently. So back in April when we put this together, you can see all the various requests for 17-18. You can see the cash on hand that's available, which we have now updated. We've updated this as well. So you can see that if we wanted to do everything on this list, including the $1 million for bleachers, we would be looking at $1.85 million worth of projects. We have $682,000 available in cash on hand. So if we wanted to complete everything, we would need to transfer $1,167,767. Now, we talked a lot about some things that we're going to move, including those bleachers, and we're going to push some of those. So we're going to reduce that amount by roughly $800,000. So we're looking at a transfer of around $370,000. We did speak briefly at the meeting last week when we approved the proposed final budget, and we talked a little bit about the fact that we had roughly $300 and some thousand that we knew about from prescription coverage that was included in the budget as an increase that was not going to materialize because our percentage was not as high as we anticipated. Administration is recommending that we take that $300,000 and move that towards capital. That will give us some options when we discuss with the Finance Committee of what we can do with our budget in order to make sure that it's balanced and complete some of the capital projects that we know that we need to do. And I think we're happy to answer any questions.
So you had talked before about, I mean, we had talked at least twice before, two of these meetings, about splitting the bleacher project in half, like that. So at next month's facilities meeting, or I guess after the finance approves it, we'll see it on the chart, split out like that.
We will actually rework this capital plan and distribute it to the Finance Committee this week for the meeting next week, which is going to be meeting of the whole board, we believe. And we'll actually revise this capital plan, and it will come as a recommendation from the Facilities Committee that this is what we're recommending to the Finance Committee for their consideration to include in the final budget.
I guess a lot of the stuff that we talk about is just routine, routine maintenance stuff. It's recurring stuff every few years. It's in like a, operations and maintenance budget, the government, the feds call it. The bleachers are a long-term, the current ones are 30, 40 years old, so it would seem to me that the bleachers are the definition of something that should come out of the capital fund that we have.
The reserved fund balance.
Yeah, yes. Not the, year-to-year operating budget that we have, but all the other maintenance items obviously should, because that's just ongoing maintenance. But this big purchase like that seems to be what that fund is for, because it's something that lasts 40 years.
So there's a couple ways that you can do those types of things that you're talking about. One of the things that you can do is you can take a look at your current year budget, and you can decide that you're going to make a transfer over to the capital fund now to basically establish more cash on hand that you can then use to pay for the project. Or you can do that anytime during the year. You could do it now before June 30th and have an additional transfer in 16-17, and then you could do another one again after October 1st in the 17-18 fiscal year. Some things that you can transfer over would be things, perhaps you have money from positions that were budgeted but weren't filled. For example, we know that our Director of Operations position, we included that in the budget for 16-17 as well as 17-18, but the position has not yet been filled. So that would be money that would become available that we could think about or talk about transferring over. It's fiscally responsible to do something like that, especially when you have a capital need and you have expenditure in the general fund that's not going to materialize. The other thing you can do is you can transfer money over multiple fiscal years, which we talked about briefly. You can also use the fund balance. You can say, we're going to utilize the fund balance.
Right. But
Now,
we've got the separate capital, not the general,
Right.
not the general fund balance, but the separate capital account that we have, which is
yeah,
something.
the restricted fund balance, and it has $6 million in it. If we were going to do that, my recommendation would be that we would wait until we have firm numbers on that project, and then transfer that money over based on the project that we know we're going to complete. So if we transfer over, let's say $300,000 this year for the bleacher project, maybe we only use $100,000 of it. We have $200,000 cash on hand, and if we wanted to do a project that was going to cost $1.2 million, we'd only have to transfer $1 million of that restricted fund balance, because we would utilize the cash on hand that was specifically identified for that project.
So my question is, I'm a little confused what you're going to do. You're talking about like approximately $200,000 for maintenance on the current bleachers coming out of this $1 million. So then there's going to be $800,000 in the future for a new project? Go ahead.
So what I'm proposing, Lydia, is I am proposing that we transfer a portion of money over that will allow us to do the repairs that the bleacher inspection is recommending to those bleachers, which will extend the useful life, and will also give us an opportunity to have some funds available to research more thoroughly what the cost of that project could be and the possible scope. It will give us an opportunity to address concerns that were brought up by other board members about if we were doing a project, now might be the time to look at expanding the project to include other things such as restrooms, because we don't have restrooms down by the stadium, and prepare a menu option of things that we could potentially consider if we were moving forward with that project. It will also give us an opportunity to have conversations with the home and school organizations who might be interested, or the booster groups that might be interested in helping offset the cost of the project.
Okay, so you want to move 200,000 over, and you're not going to spend, it sounds like you're not going to spend anywhere near that amount. You're going to spend a small portion on repairing the current bleachers up to safety standard, and then, I'm still unclear, you're going to use some of this to go out and get information, and then the rest of it you're just going to keep on hand for when you decide to do the project that
We
is
would
sort of
need-
unspecified right now?
Right, we would need to hire someone to help us with some design.
Okay, so you use some of this money for that.
Correct.
So you'd have to hire design and engineering professionals who do this for a living, and they don't come cheap.
Okay. Well, I mean, I've said this before. It's my opinion that this is not anywhere near as important as having smaller class sizes at critical points in our children's education. This is kind of a wish list. I mean, it would be great to have bathrooms and, but this is not part of the core mission of what we do. I want safe bleachers, absolutely. I don't want anyone hurt, but what this project will look like, I mean, I don't know that we can afford a project like this at this time.
Well, I think what you have to look at is the option that Mike gave us. This is something capital. This is something that's going to last for 40 years. So we do have designated monies that we can take out, which would not affect our curriculum or our class size.
Understood, Chuck. I'm talking very, very globally on priorities.
Well, that's what I'm
not
talking
how
about.
we, shuffle the money around budget-wise. And
I mean, we have the money in a fund that's dedicated for projects like this, and it doesn't affect the money that we're going to spend on the educational program.
well, no, only if we choose to spend it that way. I mean, that's
Well,
not
it's-
true.
But it's just in a bucket. It's not being spent. So we're not using that money on educational piece right now. We could choose to take money out of that and then bring it back into education if we want to. But we put money aside for capital improvements, and that's what the facilities committee is supposed to do, is look at it. So we don't want to come up against something in 5 years and go, the roofs are leaking, this is happening. I've been here when we had issues like that, and we don't want to, Mike was in school at the time.
No, absolutely. I'm not
So,
talking about that, Chuck.
yeah,
I'm talking about
safety.
spending up to 200,000 exploring a dream bleacher project that
Well,
I'm not in favor of that.
I would tend
so.
to possibly, actually, I would agree with you that maybe before we do have to make sure we keep it safe, but before we do expend money on looking at it, we may want to go to the board and see whether they're willing to spend that kind of money on it. So I would tend to, I don't want to be the person that would make that decision in the committee. We can bring that up and see what the board wants to do. I would agree with you on that.
Well, I think we're being asked to put this forth as a recommendation from our committee that we have
Right.
this money available to explore this project. I'm not sure that I'm in favor of that.
Okay.
So
Oh,
let's
all
talk
right.
So you
about
don't
that.
want to explore the money, you don't want to spend money to see what we need?
That's not what we're doing. We're spending money on
That is
different
what we're-
designs.
that
No,
is what we're doing.
I was under the impression that we've been told that they are safe.
The
Right, but-
$200,000 is broken up. Think of the big bucket, as Chuck said, of 200,000. That big bucket has mini buckets in it. One will be for the repair to get it up to safety. One little bucket can be for the design and the engineering, you figure out what we need. And the other buckets may never get spent, and that just gets rolled over to the next year.
Right.
So it's not that, Michelle is just saying $200,000 as a number. We are not planning to spend the full $200,000. That money would then roll.
It's up to, not
Correct.
start.
Yeah, do we have some idea, because some people have implied it's very expensive to get these designs. I don't want to spend like $75,000 on designs for a project that I don't think we can afford. So
So
it doesn't
one-
make a lot of sense to me.
One of the things when the gentleman comes out next week to look at the bleachers, he is from a bleacher manufacturing company. He will provide us with some complimentary drawings, which will include just basic bleacher replacement. He will do that for us. It's a service that they provide. There is no charge for them to do that. How detailed they will be, I'm not 100% certain. But we definitely, even if we're just at the bare minimum, replacing the bleachers, we will need to hire somebody to help us with the engineering and to help us oversee the project and to help with permitting and things like that. So there was going to be engineering costs associated with it, regardless of what type of project we do. As we move forward with this, exploring the project, there may not be any desire by board members to expand it any further. We have not had that conversation with all board members. But what transferring that 200,000 over, and it doesn't even have to be that much, it could be something less than that. It gives us the flexibility to be able to extend the project over multiple years and explore what the scope actually will be. We've not had conversations with the booster organizations. I don't know that there's booster organizations who are willing or able to help contribute towards the cost of that. But not having any ability to be able to explore what the engineering piece of it is going to be, it kind of ties our hands and really limits what we'll be able to do in terms of trying to get a really good cost estimate for the program.
So we don't want to tie your hands. Obviously, we want more information. So how about if we agree to put 100,000 through? Because once you put this money in there, it's going to be used for
No.
this type of thing rather than used
She's
for
ask-
educational.
She's asking for, it's not coming out of, it's not coming out of the unrestricted fund balance, it's coming out of the capital fund balance that's there for this. It's not like if we don't, she's asking for the 200 out of the restricted capital fund,
Well,
not the unrestricted fund, what is it called, 8 or whatever it is.
So I'm not asking it from out of there. What I'm recommending right now, as we sit at this table, is I am recommending that we take the money that we know that was budgeted for the
On the
prescription
prescription drugs.
coverage, that we know that we're not going to have to spend, and we move that over to a transfer to capital. That will then allow us, we're still using all of the exceptions, of course, we're still going up to the Act 1 index, but we've just taken that expenditure, and instead of budgeting for it in prescription coverage, we're budgeting it in the transfer to capital. Now, Lydia, one of the things that you said is once you move it over to this fund, you can't use it for educational purposes. That's not true. At any point in time, the board can make the determination that they want to pull any excess money back out of this account and use it for educational things. So your hands are not restricted. You just need a board resolution to do that. You have money in your unassigned fund balance, and we have money in several buckets of the assigned fund balance. What you have to remember is we are limited by how much we can have in our unassigned fund balance. Currently, we can only have 8% of our expenditures. Right now, we have that. So we can't really have any more money in our unassigned fund balance because we're not allowed to. The state won't allow us to. So when I understand what you're saying about wanting to be able to put it in instructional programs, you can't really do that unless you would use the unassigned fund balance and then you would replenish.
Yes, but we have a big unresolved, I think, difference of opinion about some information we got at the last business meeting. I mean, I heard information that makes me think we need to have more watch positions potentially in this budget. So if we have this prescription money sitting out there, the last place I want to put it is into looking at bleachers at the high school when I think we have some class size issues that we may still need to investigate. You've been very silent. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think that if the recommendation from our administrators is to move 200,000 over, I think we should move the 200,000. I don't think it binds us or ties us to not use those funds if we get through the budget process and decide that we would rather allot those funds to another watch position or whatever that might be. This is a movement that can be moved again, as I understand what you're telling me. So I think I'm inclined to follow the recommendation to allow the budget process to unfold, and if we determine we need another watch position, we can certainly reallocate those funds.
Correct. That would be, to pull it back, as Michelle stated, would be through a resolution by the board.
Well, we approved the transfer. Correct.
You would approve the budget, which would have the transfer
Right.
over to the capital fund. At any time, you could transfer those dollars back.
Right.
And I think that we will have additional conversations, Lydia, that will address some of your concerns regarding staffing. I'm sure that we will most likely have some of those conversations as we move forward with the budget.
Yeah, so I think we also have to remember, part of this bucket that we're assigning is to bring the bleachers into safety compliance. So we can't just ignore that. And at this point, we don't have that specific number. So do we have this?
We have, it's going to be approximately $25,000 for the materials to do it, but until you get the engineer to oversee it and that, those costs, let's say, would double. I don't know what they would be, but let's say $50,000 to get it up to specs that we don't have to, and site work, that we don't have to worry about any kind of safety issues.
So there will need to be some expenditure, is my point. We can't simply say we don't want to put anything into the bleachers. So we're talking about some additional amount above that.
This is a good situation we're in right now because we do need to look at the long-term plan and longevity of the bleachers too.
Yeah, we can see the
safety
train.
inspection wasn't, oh, you're fine, don't worry about this. There is this will carry you for a few more years, but we still need to look at the long-term plan. And in that discussion for the long-term plan, there's going to be significant discussion here at the board level on what that long-term plan then would look like. And I think that's what you're getting at. What would that look like? What are our options? There was a discussion at the last finance. The reason the whole menu discussion came up is because a board member had questioned and just said, wow, if we do something down the road for the bleachers, what else should we be thinking about? And that's when other board members said, well, let's, exactly your concerns, let's make sure we look at it as separate items so that way the board can discuss whether or not those would be items we'd want to do or not do. So I think there's a lot of planning still has to take place, and I think this money will be well spent to put us in the right place to plan properly.
Right, we can see the train coming down the tracks at us, you know, and we have a bunch of known unknowns. We know what we don't know, and we're going to hire a guy to tell us what we don't know and answer those questions.
And I appreciate what Lydia is saying here, though. I mean, I understand the concern over the academic side of things and our obligation to do that. I do feel we have a corresponding obligation, however, to also provide safe facilities. And I think we have to be mindful of that. And like we know that, you know, there's going to have to be a repair at some point, and we just have to put ourselves in a position when that repair becomes necessary or replacement becomes necessary, we aren't in a position where we haven't thought about it and we haven't budgeted for it. So I think it's prudent at this point to start that planning process.
All right, thank you for indulging me.
So are we recommending to the board that we go ahead and transfer the 200?
I think that's
That'll all be in
the
capital.
consensus. I would prefer to transfer 100, but I'm in the minority there, so just go on record as saying that.
So what I'm hearing from this committee is that as administration, we have your approval to revise this capital plan based on the discussions that we had this evening and move it forward to the facilities or the finance committee for consideration and inclusion into the final budget.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us, is there anything else, Michelle? Okay. That brings us to public comment. We have -2 minutes for that. Is there any public comment at this time?
Judy Sherry, Governor's Circle. I think that it would really make a lot of sense if the Triparty agreement was distributed to all board members so they have a copy and can refer to it, especially now that this issue is coming forward. And the second point is I really heard what Ms. Solomon said about class sizes, which were stunningly large, I thought, at the budget workshop when they were presented. And I like that priority in terms of how the board should be looking at it. When you're talking about core classes where the average class size was 29 and 30, that should be a priority. So I heard today during the discussion that we can always take money out of capital and put it into instructional purposes. I'd like to hear one time when that happened, because I have never, ever heard that happen, at least in my time here. So I think it is, when you talk about flexibility, it always seems like the money is spent. So I would question that. Thank you.